Alrighty, so today we're here to plug another movie in to the one-shot review system. The movie today that I watched was The Net, starring Sandra Bullock, a film by Irwin Winkler. This movie is essentially a cautionary tale about how much information is digitally fingerprinted about all of us at any given point, and then how that information could be used to basically ruin your life. But I mean, it's not really what it's about, but that's a key component of this movie. Essentially, this movie details the story of elite hacker beta tester Sandra Bullock, who goes by Angela something in this movie. And she, as a day job, basically receives floppy disks from companies with video game or other type of computer programs where she will play it, look for certain bugs, and sort of debug them and write them out, and then send the fixed program back to the company. Upon doing so in this movie, you kind of open up to a pretty interesting scene where she is actually testing Wolfenstein 3D, or maybe the sequel to that, I'm not sure, but that was kind of fun that was the game that she's playing in the beginning. But then she receives another disc in the mail, puts it in, and it has some crazy program on it that allows you, if you click a certain portion of it, to access government mainframe that you would not have access to without this program. And so that obviously poses its own high risk, but she's about to go on vacation, so she's not supposed to have to worry about that. But her business partner convinces her to work on it last second before she leaves. But he never shows up. And the reason why is that we see him try to fly his own plane from wherever he's at to where he's going, and his flight navigation systems aren't working correctly, and he flies, crashes, and dies in a burning blaze. So we already know that something fishy is going on with this program, and she apparently just hears that this guy passed away. Oh, that's pretty sad. Goes on vacation, and this is sort of where things start to get a little bit crazy. Apparently, this floppy disk is the only known evidence of one of these sort of programs being leaked out in the wild, and she is one of the only people that has access to the evidence of these people are hacking into these different government databases and things like that. And first we see some guy looking at her in the airport, and then she meets this dude who eventually seduces her at this vacation. He seems like a nice guy. He likes all the same movies she likes. It plays on her emotions in some aspect because he knows about her personal information. And then he has another guy steal her purse and throw it in the bushes, and then he takes her out on a date. And the whole time he's been looking for this floppy disk, and he gets it out of her purse. But then he tries to kill her after they have their date, so that he sort of ties up all those loose ends. The first thing I didn't like in this movie was that, they go through the whole date, and even though we already know that this guy's a scumbag, they let us watch him seduce her into like a one-night stand. It just feels like a completely unnecessary thing to happen, especially if this guy just needs to basically suicide this girl and end his mission. But I guess maybe male horniness or misogyny in Hollywood, I don't know. Just seemed like a weird scene in general, but disregarding that kind of sets up the whole conflict in this movie where after Sandra Bullock escapes this situation, she wakes up, tries to go get her bearings back and go back to the United States, but she finds out that her identity has essentially been erased and replaced with a bunch of false information, making it very hard for her to get back in the States. And she uses this false name that they set up to her identity to get back into the States. But once she's there, she finds out somebody sold her house. She can't get access to any of her credit cards. Nobody knows she ever existed. Some other lady has her name now and works her job at her company. And they've basically hemmed her up real nice. And the guy's still following after her, trying to kill her because she did not kill him that day. The movie, just from that point, continues to have all these different situations where Sandra Bullock is encountering this guy. She escapes him. She finds out more information about the hacking group. Um, the guy finds her again. She escapes, more information, so on and so forth, sort of uncovering the details about this mysterious organization while at the same time sort of running for her life and trying to figure out a path to get her life back together. Um, Another thing that I thought was kind of silly about this movie was this character, her ex-boyfriend shrink guy. And it made sense that he was in the movie because he served as a great plot device to allow her to sort of get a computer, get her bearings, and start to figure out some of the information about the criminal group. But he literally is in the movie to basically be somebody that actually knows who she is, give her stuff, and then the organization offs his ass too. And they make all this like commentary where, you know, she hated this dude when she broke up with him. Then he helps her out in this situation. And apparently when they broke up, she had said that he was a selfish asshole. And the whole time that he's trying to help her, he's like being a selfish asshole again. Like he even buys Chinese food and is like, look, I got us Chinese, your favorite. She's like, I don't even like that. You're the only one that likes that. But the reason why I bring that up, because some might say that's insignificant to the story, but then later on when he's in the hospital, because they had tried to serve him the wrong drugs at the pharmacy, she's acting like they're going to get together once he's all healed up and this thing's all fixed. Later, the enemies successfully kill him through an insulin injection, so that doesn't happen. But it just was kind of weird, like, why did we add this guy to the story? The plot device makes sense, but personally, I felt like this movie dragged on a little bit too long. So they could have shortened a lot of the scenes that he was in to basically just move the plot forward, allow her to get her bearings, then off him in some way that's much quicker than what ended up happening, skip all this romantic talk, and it would have made a lot more sense and would have been a much leaner cut of the film, I feel like. But essentially, she is able to get her bearings with this dude and starts the second part of the movie, which is almost her on the offensive, figuring out who they are and how she can get their program and eventually right all the wrongs that have been done to her. In an effort not to spoil the rest of the film, I'm going to leave the rest of the details out of this video, but essentially the film ends the way you might think it would, but in an interesting way, I think. I guess, I don't have a lot to say about this movie because it wasn't really anything special. I think that the premise of this movie, the idea that, we're taking a critical look at the fact that all of this information, and I mean, this was made in 1997, so apply this to the amount of information that Google or any other company is collecting about you today and is being sold without you knowing to different third parties and stuff like that. Like, this movie could have been a very interesting movie where we're exploring the idea of how the fact that all this information is available and it's all kept digitally means it's also accessible by hackers in the wrong hands, and that could have its own disastrous outcome. I think they start to explore this and they talk about it, and I mean the main theme or the main panic in the movie is about the fact that the way the hackers are getting in is through essentially a backdoor program that all these different companies, including the US government, are buying as a cybersecurity program that actually just opens them wide open to all these hackers in this group. That is a very realistic problem and happens to companies every day. I think that was interesting that they were able to touch on that, but the way that they explored it in this movie was kind of underwhelming. So I think in general, The Net starring Sandra Bullock has an interesting premise, and if somebody could be inspired by watching this movie or by sort of the things that this movie almost gets to to make a better movie that serves the same purpose, I think that would be really cool. And I mean, just think about it. Like this movie, especially watching it today, it should have been more profound given the reality that we live in every day with how much information is being collected and shared about us. But this movie should have been really good. Like it's got Sandra Bullock as this crazy, like gamer, elite hacker person, and she's running away from a crazy elite hacker group that's running all these different terrorist attacks. Like one of them in this film is literally them hacking into the flight database and all that stuff, and that happened in real life just a couple months ago. So like I said, you know, a very interesting premise and a lot of thoughtful ideas could have come from this movie, but the way that they execute on those ideas is just kind of underwhelming. Like it's supposed to be a summer thriller, but most of these scenes are not really very thrilling. Like most of what happens is Sandra Bullock makes it to a new part of California where she's hiding out in a hotel or a motel or a Holiday Inn, not to be funny, but and then eventually the people that are chasing her find out who's been helping her, find a way to kill them, and then get her. And then how does she get out of it? Some like very convenient plot armory sort of situation. In some of them. Some of them, it's just a very realistic, I ran away and I got away situation. But other times, like the fireman's uniform being right there, perfectly available for her to grab, is a little bit convenient. And I think they almost do that a little bit too much in this film, which leads to it sort of feeling a little bit weird. This is the second time I'm filming this, by the way, which is why I'm sort of having a hard time saying things the way I did the first time. But, you know, I think the end of the movie where Sandra Bullock breaks into her old workplace and is able to sort of orchestrate the way that she wins in the end is interesting, and that is actually a thrilling part of the movie. So I feel like if they had found a way to shorten this cut up a little bit to maybe an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes instead of 2 hours, I think that that may have made it a little bit more enjoyable. And there's nothing outwardly offensive about this film. They actually get a lot of stuff about computer culture, the way that, you know, these things would be handled correct. Like when she's fixing the file in the beginning, she's opening a debug menu, and I'll forget the fact that they decompile the source code in seconds. But basically, you know, like a lot of what's going on in this movie isn't necessarily BS, but and it does raise some interesting questions about if all of these records are left in a digital database and we trust this database, if the database becomes untrustworthy, then, you know, it would wreak havoc and chaos on the entire country. One specific example is like the way that one of the characters dies is they give him an insulin injection because he was being treated for diabetes, but actually he was at the hospital because he was being treated for a penicillin allergy because he was given penicillin at the pharmacy because somebody changed his record at the pharmacy to give him penicillin instead of whatever psych drugs he was supposed to get. And then all of a sudden at the hospital, they changed his record to not him being there for the allergy, but for a diabetic situation. So all of that's like very scary and very real. And they have this scene where she's like trying to tell the nurse that he's not diabetic. And she's like, ma'am, the system says. And, you know, like me personally, I just had an experience where I tried to get my license in the new state that I live. And the BMV said that I couldn't get my license because of like an open speeding ticket that I had paid like 2 months prior. Same thing happened, like the system was wrong. And this lady's like, sir, the system says that there's a hold, right? And, you know, it is scary to think that we exist on such a fragile little thing, but unfortunately, this movie does not do a good enough job of exploring that concept for it to be anything profound. So if I'm plugging this into the where should you watch it score, I would say that if you are bored and you need a movie to watch, or you're interested in a movie where Sandra Bullock is some elite hacker and her life's been ruined because somebody messed with her identity, I think that, and maybe you're into like the 90s hacker aesthetic. I think that this movie does have that aspect to it. So if you're interested in a movie like that, it's definitely worth watching just to sort of check the box and know what it was. But other than that, I mean, you could skip this one. Unless you find it for free on streaming or for $1 at the exchange. Like, I would honestly probably skip this one. I'm glad I watched it. I thought it was an interesting film. So if you want to watch it just for that aspect, to be critical of it, then go for it. But that's what I would say is like if you can see it for free, like you maybe caught it on TV or something like that. That would be a way to watch it that made sense. But I wouldn't go out of your way to find or buy this film. Um, if I'm plugging it into my out of 5 score, I don't think there was anything that makes this movie an outright bad movie. There's nothing offensive about this movie. There's nothing lazy about this movie. I just feel that the way that they moved the plot forward was a little bit convenient and they didn't really deliver on the promise of like a summer action thriller. So I'll give this movie a weak 3. Not a good 3, not a strong 3, but a weak 3 because I just think if I called it a 2, that would be doing it a disservice. But there isn't really anything special going on with this one, other than that, say like computer aesthetic and all of that. But yeah, that is Irwin Winkler's The Net featuring Sandra Bullock, and we gave it a weak 3, and that's the film.